What's going on, everybody? We are back. Episode number 165 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight, we're talking UFC Vegas 86. We got Joe Pyfer in his first main event. He's taking on the Joker, Jack Hermansson. Fun card. A lot of bets for me. I think Lags has some bets. I was looking at some stuff. Yeah, we'll jump into all of that. First, guys, before we do anything, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Helps us out a lot. And before we jump into this week, let's briefly talk about last week. Last week, decent card for me. I finished up 2.68 units. Pretty on the money lines, though. I had Pogus plus 225 for a unit and a half, which won. But then I lost my bet on Quinones at plus 155, though I thought he won that fight. I bet Stolyarenko at minus 123, which was a horrendous bet. And then I had Muradov plus 156, and obviously that fight only lasted 11 seconds, so it was no contest. On the prop side, I had 1.6 units on the over 2.5 at minus 160 for Dalid Zimabov. I also had goes the distance at a half unit for plus 172. I think with everybody else on Twitter last week, I also cashed the Molly McCann submission at plus 600. I had 0.33 units on that. And then I lost smaller pokes on sub 2 and 3. Lost on Radke Urbina goes the distance and lost on Radke by decision. Good card, but ultimately kind of like a lot of regret that I didn't just play Radke's money line and I played him by decision only there. Pretty stupid given he was plus 180. So that kind of hurt. But we made profit, so that's all that matters. How'd you do last week, Lex?
Up 4.5 units. Start off with the Muradov fight. Obviously, that was a no contest. Was on Medeiros for 1.3 units to win a unit. And then I also played, again, Molly sub at plus 700 for half a unit. So,
can you see me okay?
You are frozen on my screen.
Oh, beautiful.
Yep, you are frozen. Well, we will wait for John to hopefully get back in here, having a little bit of technical difficulties. All right, John should be back in a couple minutes, seems like, or a second here, I should say. But we'll just hang out in the meantime here. Don't know if I'll be bringing the Daggy beard back. Can't lie.
All right, do you hear me?
Yes, hear you fine. I know I'm
Okay.
terrible solo man at that, so glad to have you back, John.
I'm not going to touch anything on my computer because I'm using my old computer because I have it connected to my monitors in here, and it seems like it might be having a meltdown. Worst
Okay.
case scenario, it happens again, and I'll pull out my new computer. But Lags, I'm going to need you to pull up FightOdds.io as well as Tapology. And
I can do both of those, and I can I'll run the show in terms of like the fights.
All right, yeah, you're going to run it from the host seat today. The next week I'll get my computer set up.
Yep, here. I can do that. So first fight of the night, we have Arichi Lang and Daniel Marcos. John, you want to take it away?
Odds. Give me the odds.
Yep. So we have Arichi Lang is sitting about plus 215 and Daniel Marcos minus 255.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about this fight. I kind of think the price might be a little wide. I feel the market is a bit too high on Daniel Marcos in general. I mean, and he's a decent striker, decent volume guy, decent kicker, but he's kind of getting treated as someone who's been around for like a couple years and has a bunch of UFC fights when he's really only got 2 fights, and those fights were finishing Simon Oliveira, who's horrible and no longer with the organization, I believe, and robbing Davy Grant in England. That's really the only, and he got badly out volume by Davy Grant in that fight. Those are his only fights. So it's like, I think he's kind of nifty. I think he does some cool stuff. Like I said, good boxer, good leg kicks, an okay defensive wrestler. But I mean, he's not someone to me who looks like, a superstar or anything like that. And Arichi Lang, he's got his issues, but big hitter. Not many guys really separate from him in striking. So, like, I think Marcos is a lot better than him, but I feel it's going to be a striking fight where Arichi Lang is the guy who probably has the grappling upside if there's any, and he's probably carrying more power here. Probably going to pass it, though, but I don't think the price makes too much sense. What are your thoughts, Lex?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting fight to start the card off because I mean, kind of like you talked about there, I don't think there's a ton of grappling upside, really. I mean, really for either side, but if any side was going to have any, it'd be the Arichi Lang side. But he is so hittable on the feet and just fairly wooden, just kind of plodding. So I feel like Marcos, his speed, his power in general on the feet, I think he can just land good hard shots and get out of danger pretty easy and often here. But kind of like to your point you touched on already, he's not like he's fighting good guys, not like he's, proven anything to us to warrant a massive near minus 300 price tag. So easy pass. Yeah. I feel like I think GTD might not be a horrible look in this kind of a fight, but I just don't think there's a ton of finishing.
Actually, GTD is kind of interesting. I don't think Marcos is like a nuclear hitter or anything like that.
It's minus 150.
That's not that great.
No. All right. Kick it off to the next one. Here we got Haider Emil Fernie Garcia. I was saying the full name.
Yeah, I just call him
Fernie Garcia and Haider Emil. I mean, I think the favorite's kind of justified. I mean, I get it's now minus 200, but I feel like the pressure of Emil, he's got good pace as well. I don't think much of Fernie in general. I just think he's pretty low volume, doesn't have much grappling upside either. So I think this should be an easy spot for Haider.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to make a habit of betting debutantes at juice against UFC vets. I don't do that really at all. But I'm actually what are the odds right now? I think it's minus 190.
Oh, sorry. I got you. My bad. Sorry about that. Minus 195 Emil, and then Fernie plus 168. Come back on Bet Online.
Yeah. So I don't like betting spots like this, but I think this is kind of a more, I don't know. I feel it's a very friendly fight for Emil. I'm not particularly high on Haider Emil just because, you watch this guy's fight and it's like it's good volume, good pressure. He's obviously very, very aggressive, but the guy has no defense at all. I mean, it's as easy as it gets to hit this guy flush on the chin. He has shown strong durability thus far in his career, but I mean, at some point that's going to crack. And so I'm actually looking to fade Emil in the UFC. But he's got Fernie Garcia here. And the truth is, Fernie Garcia may be a UFC vet, but he's 0-3. He hasn't really shown, he's an okay boxer, decent counter game, but he hasn't really shown the ability, in my opinion, to actually ever separate at the UFC level. He's a 135-pounder who's now moving up to 145 pounds. This fight's on less than a week's notice. He's low volume. I don't even think he's particularly durable. And so you have Emil who's much, much bigger, much, much more aggressive, hits way harder, probably has more grappling upside, and definitely has more finishing equity. I think the line at worst is right. I've considered taking a poke at it. I haven't decided yet, but I lean the Emil side fairly strongly here. What are your thoughts, Legs?
I gave him. It's okay,
Oh,
John.
whoops. Well,
no, you're good. You're good. You're new to the role, new to the. So we'll move on to the next one. Zach Pauga and Bogdan Guskov. And actually, I'll start this one off because I have a fairly passionate take for a pass at the moment. But honestly, I think it's Pauga or pass. Like, I get a lot of people are saying, like, Pauga's just fairly mid. You know, what has he done? He's fairly low volume, not much of a grappler. But, like, Bogdan's got maybe 5 minutes of gas, if that. Dude's fairly hittable. He's got big power, sure, but horrible defensive grappler, horrible cardio, like I mentioned. I think Pauga can mix in the wrestling like he did in both the Jordan Wright fight, which everybody called it ugly, but again, an easy win for Pauga. And then in his last fight against Modestas, where I bet they're at plus 170 and thought he probably should have gotten the nod. So I lean Pauga here, and I might end up on him as well.
Yeah, I was almost positive I was going to bet Pauga prior to taping the fight because I bet Vulcan quite large against Guskov in his debut. And in my head, I was thinking Guskov is really, really bad. Surely I'm going to bet a guy who's clearly UFC level in the Pauga side. But then I take Pauga, and, I don't know. My thoughts about Guskov haven't changed terribly much. I don't think he's very good. Poor defense, not a great wrestler. But he hits hard. He's a decent, he's got a couple decent counter hooks. And Pauga is not a big guy. He's not particularly high output. He enters the pocket very, very recklessly. Something I noticed is like this guy, you'll see if you rewatch the Modestas fight, Modestas started picking up on him, and he just had to throw a check hook every time he entered, and it was going to clip him flush. And it's like that's a big concern for me because unless he can just mug in the grappling, and maybe he can, I'm just not super confident in the grappling of Pauga just in general. But unless he can mug there, I don't feel not that I feel bad about Pauga on the feet, but I feel he's vulnerable enough that it's hard to make him a big favorite on the feet. And as Dixon Sider, great name, just said on the sideline here, he couldn't even he dragged Jordan Wright over the finish. He's like the only person in 15 fights to do that. I don't feel strongly about it. I am passing this personally, unless it came down like Pauga plus money, but Pauga 55% seems reasonable to me.
All right. Start off with you, John. The next spot, Jeremiah Wells and Max Griffin. We got Jeremiah Wells at minus 153 now, looking like on Bet Online, and plus 133 for Max Griffin. What do you think?
I might bet Wells. I haven't decided yet, but I'm kind of leaning in that direction. I'm not even like super high on Jeremiah Wells because the guy obviously is, a mess striking, very easy to hit. He's been hurt a bunch, but it's hard not to rate his grappling. The thing is, I'm not even sure he's a great wrestler, but the guy is clearly immensely physically strong. Something that I think he has showed us over the last couple of fights is bucking the narrative that he's got bad cardio. It seems at this point he's just very, very good at fighting through and continuing to go. And something that really, really stood out to me when I was looking at the stats for this matchup is Jeremiah Wells has been in a control position for 76% of his time in the octagon. Like, that is a bananas number. And so that's not really a number you want to fade. And on the Griffin side, like, I've always been a fan of Max Griffin. We've talked about him on this show a bunch. Quality fighter, good boxer, good power. But he's getting older. I mean, they're both old. Wells is 37, Griffin's 38. But, Max has, good jab, good pull counter, and I think he could get off on Wells with those shots early, potentially even finish Wells in the first round here. That wouldn't shock me. But with that being said, Griffin, I feel like is slowing radically, and like you're seeing in his cardio that the guy is just not, he can't really go hard for more than like 5 minutes anymore. And you combine that with the fact that he's never been very good on the bottom to begin with, and now he's taking on a guy in Wells who's a beast on top, like a Henzo Black Belt who's immensely physically strong. And it's just really hard for me to think that like Griffin is underlined here. If anything, I think the Wells side is underlined because yeah, Griffin could knock him out, but like I think one takedown and this fight starts to snowball fairly quickly. Gives up a bunch of control, probably gets tired, and as he starts to get tired, the takedowns probably come easier for Wells down the stretch. I feel like, Dix Insider says he thinks Wells wins 1 and Max wins 3. I would be legitimately shocked if Max won around 3. Shocked if that happened. That's kind of like where I am. I think
I'm not gonna say that it's vice versa, but like because I do think Wells has a high chance of winning round 1, but I think Max is much more allowed to win round 1 than round 3.
I agree. I do not trust Griffin at all down the stretch in fights anymore. I mean, Tim Means took him down 3 times in the 3rd round. And I love Tim Means, but he's just not the same guy anymore. So yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like something I'm kind of looking at is maybe taking a poke at Griffin KO1. So I think it covers some bases, and I think it's a reasonably live outcome. But I also feel like short of that, it's going to be a pretty rough fight for Griffin, and the grappling and control upside of Wells is just like astronomical here. What do you think?
So real quick, are you going to go KO1 and then Wells money line also?
Probably, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I think off the top, recency bias for sure. I feel like a lot of people are just remembering Wells got choked out in his last fight. He was dominating, and then he choked up, he got gassed. Yeah. I don't think he was gassed. Just more or less. I mean, he did expend a lot of energy, no doubt, but he got caught in a good sub. But yeah, no, I think Wells dominant grappling edge here on the feet. I mean, he's super hittable for sure, but like his power is no joke. Like you talked about with the wrestling, though, I kind of agree because to me, it's not that he's like sprinting for these takedowns, but he's using a lot of just like athleticism and just sheer physical
hossing people.
Yes, literally though, hossing people. So out to me, like that 2nd and 3rd round, I think it's going to be huge advantages for him just due to that physical strength after that 1st round. So yeah, I like Wells here. I'm probably going to play him for a unit and a half.
Yeah, I agree. I love Max, but it's just really, really hard for me to imagine it. Not hard for me to imagine him winning, but like I really think one takedown in the fight snowballs on him.
For sure. All right, so next fight we got Devin Clark and Marcin Prachnio. We got Devin Clark is sitting about -230. Comeback on Prachnio +195. Clark should be fine here. Personally, I think he is the best wrestler that Prachnio has fought to date. Obviously, all the concerns about Devin Clark. He's kind of head case, this and that, but I think this is a great fight for him. Prachnio, you have to worry about his volume a little bit on the feet, but I don't know. I just feel like this guy is just not fighting scared striking, but just he knows his chin is not great. He's trying to avoid the exchanges. I think Clark can tire this guy out, get takedowns pretty easily, control him. Probably Clark decision. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was looking at Prachnio when it first came out because obviously, my initial instinct with Devin Clark is to just assume he's going to
fade him at Mega Juice.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's kind of weird because I felt like Prachnio was a pretty decent defensive wrestler off the Lynch fight where his hips look good and his get-ups look good. But then he fought Petrino and he just got mugged. And like to your point, I feel like Clark is a better wrestler than he's certainly a more credentialed wrestler than either Petrino or Lynch. But I think he's generally a better wrestler. And Prachnio, when he starts to get tired and ends up on bottom, he just looks totally fucked to me. The striking's kind of interesting because obviously Prachnio leg kicks and volume could be helpful here. But I mean, Clark hits a lot harder. He was like outstriking Dong Jung. I feel the striking's probably competitive, but I think Clark has considerably more knockout upside than Prachnio does. Same thing with submission upside and just basically process winning upside in this fight. So, yeah, I mean, -230 seems fine to me. What do you see for Clark KO?
I was trying to refresh my screen here. I lost a little bit of internet here. That's why I was trying to do it while you were talking there. But let me look real quick. I'll pull it up for you.
Because I actually think that is kind of a potentially interesting.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's a potentially interesting look, depending what it is.
I'm pretty sure last time I looked, it was under 4-1. So it is, 375.
under 4-1 for a guy with 2 career KOs in the UFC is kind of not it. Yeah.
All right, next fight we got Loma Lupami and Bruna Brazil. Loma all the way out to -280 now. Come back on Brazil +240. John, dog hunter. Are we going dog hunting? Are we going dog hunting here?
I have Loma to close a parlay with Jasmine
Nice.
from a couple weeks back at like -110. Not Loma at -110. The parlay was like
Right, I know.
-110.
I
Just saying.
I would hope.
Hope. I think Bruna Brazil is one of the most tragically awful fighters in women's MMA. She's got decent physicality for someone who's as shitty as she is. Like decent kicks, decent power in her hands. But like, if you get inside on this woman, she has like no defense at all. I mean, Denise Gomes was just spamming the same overhead right over and over and over again, and literally hitting her flush in the chin repeatedly. I think she got a bit too much hype for out clinching Marnik Mann, who is horrendous on Contender Series, and then barely out clinching, or not even out clinching, barely escaping Shauna O'Bannon. Now she's fighting like an A+ fighter in the clinch in Loma. Look, if they're a distance, Loma is short enough and is behind enough in reach that Bruna can maybe have some success here. But I think Bruna's going to do worse in the clinch than just about everybody Loma's fought recently. I think Loma's going to get takedowns pretty easily off those trips. Yeah, I just think Loma's the much better fighter in this spot and probably gets a bunch of takedowns and controls her pretty easily. Dixon has how many units in that parlay, John? Just 1 unit. I don't really have much confidence in Loma at -300. I'm not really trying to bet that, but
agree.
I think the line's fine.
Yeah, I think Loma Juice is pretty safe personally, just because of that massive wrestling edge. If she, literally, if she wanted to, she can easily land 4 to 5 takedowns if she pursued heavy enough. And she'd be fine on the feet. Like you touched on Brazil, pretty much target practice, in my opinion. I think Loma should be landing harder shots. Obviously, in my opinion, much better striker, huge wrestling edge. Yeah, I like Loma. Yeah, she should be safe in any parlays. I like it, John. All right, moving on to the next fight. I don't believe we have odds for it, though. Is Balaji Oki and...
We do have odds for it. They're here, let me pull up my phone. I think Oki's a decent favorite right now, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on. Pulling up
I have them on fight odds. I have it on my phone too.
My computer. I mean, this is an old ass computer, but it's completely collapsing on me here. So I'm just trying to do nothing on it so I don't get cleared off stream again.
You're good. I was gonna say I will give my short breakdown of this fight because I did tape it a little bit last night. Oki, nothing special to me outside of like athleticism. He hits pretty hard. But I feel like Kawamba is very hittable standing and not a huge threat in the wrestling. So I feel like it should be a decent fight for Oki. But again, like 2-1 on Oki, I'm fine passing.
Yeah, so the price at this moment,
if that is the price, I'm pretty sure that's what I
Oki -193, comeback +168. Yeah, I don't have much interest in it, honestly. If anything here, I'm seeing like the over 2.5 is currently +135, but obviously this just opened up, so this market's probably going to bounce around a bit. I'm kind of tempted by that. Honestly, I don't really rate either of these guys. Well, Kawamba, I think, is a decent prospect, and that he's an okay boxer, decent footwork, pretty fast, but he's moving up in weight, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, this is an extremely short notice fight, and Oki is not a guy I want someone going up on short notice with against, because while I don't think Oki is very good at anything skill-wise, the dude does have just like crazy durability and the ability to just tank damage. And that kind of guy can really just exploit, the gas tank of someone who might not have had a full camp or might not have been training at all for a fight like this. So that's a concern. But I honestly think Kawamba's probably a better fighter. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say it's at 155.
Yeah. Yep. So Kawamba, I believe, fought at 145 on Contenders.
He did. Yep.
Yeah.
I was just looking at those last 3 fights.
So he's giving away a lot of size. He's on short notice. I think he's more skilled, though. Like, I could see him easily outstriking Oki here. But, yeah, like I said, I think he's more skilled. I just don't really want – I mean, these are both young kids debuting. Like, I don't really want to have money on this kind of a mess, to be honest. But I'll pick Kawamba. I'll lean the Kawamba side.
All right.
We always like a dog.
Dog Hunter John. Speaking of the dog that you always love, we got Trevin Giles and Carlos Freitas. Carlos Freitas sitting at about minus 255. Come back on Giles plus 215. I'll start with you, John, because Trevin Giles is a part of your dog fan club, I would say, along with maybe GM3 and some others. So
I don't
Trevin
know if
Giles,
I
you going?
hate anybody more than Trevin Giles, who I've bet more. Like, I think I've bet Trevin Giles 7 or 8 times in his career,
That's what I'm
which
saying.
is sickening.
Huge fan, number one fan. Are you going back to the brink here to war with him?
I might. I'm probably going to end up taking a shot at him for a unit. Like, I'm going to wait and see where the line goes because I think this could keep blowing out pretty far. I don't even really like. I mean, as you know, I'm not a huge Giles fan, but I feel like I've given this exact same breakdown about 100 times when it comes to Trevin Giles at this point on the show. Dude, I mean, Trevin Giles is a lunch pail, UFC fighter. He's a 500 UFC, or a slightly above 500 UFC fighter. He's 7-5 in 12 fights. He's very experienced. He hits hard. He's a capable grappler. He's a capable submission player. He's a decent boxer. He's fought really tough competition. He's an idiot. That's part of it too,
Massive.
and that's why everybody hates him. But the truth is, despite him being an idiot, Giles he's a very proven fighter. We know what he is. Giles is like a very good kind of gatekeeper of the top 40, in top 45, something like that. That's what he is. And Carlos Prates, I actually think he's a decent prospect. He looks decent, but he's 30 years old, so he's not that young. But he hits hard. He strings combinations together very well. His volume is reasonably high. So, yeah, I think he profiles as a decent prospect. The thing is, when I look at Prates, it's like, I know he knocked out Mitch Ramirez at contenders, but Mitch Ramirez is terrible, and he arguably lost the first round to Mitch Ramirez that fight, which is kind of a gross look. I feel like if you get inside on Prates, I mean, he is big and long, but if you get inside on him, there's not a lot of defense there, and he's there to be countered. And then I think there's real questions about his grappling. I saw him hit a decent butterfly sweep against Ramirez. Ramirez is a terrible grappler, and that kind of impressed me. But there's not really a whole lot of other data on Prate's grappling, and he's been subbed 4 times, I believe, in his career to date, which leads me to believe there might be a decent-sized hold there. So it's like you have this guy Prates who seems like a decent prospect, but he's got a fair amount of questions about him. He's kind of defensively vulnerable. And he's taking on like a 12-fight UFC vet who's got finishing capabilities on the ground and on the feet. Minus 250 feels a bit insane to me. I feel like minus 185 was kind of like fair for Prates in this fight. Maybe even minus 200, although I feel like that's it. You're really kind of getting up there at that point. But yeah, I mean, I'll probably stab Giles small, I would guess. Not for sure, but I'm leaning that way. What do you think?
Not that I'm totally in love with where the line's at like now, but I just don't think that there's a ton of grappling and wrestling success for Giles in this spot. So where I'm like, I think it's largely going to stay on the feet. Prates cleaner striker. Personally, I think going through tape, I wished his volume could be a little bit higher. I think there's just a lot of moments where just a lot of inconsistency, I should say. But like you touched on, he can be hit coming in, closing in on the pocket like that. But I think Prates probably finds a knockout round 2, probably. I know it's not really a hot take by any means.
I can't blame anybody for not wanting to be on the Trevin Giles side.
Right. So next we got up Adolfo Vieira and Armen Petrosyan. We got Vieira sitting around minus 120 now. Comeback on Petrosyan plus 100. And I was talking to you a little bit before about a couple of the money lines I was looking at, and definitely for sure this is one of them with Vieira. Kind of just debating on whether or not I want to the sizing on it, I should say. But to me, the grappling hole is just so large and so much bigger than the gap on the feet, and not to mention that even just the finishing threat on the ground compared to the finishing threat on the feet. Like if Adolfo ends up, moments on the feet for a little bit here and there, I don't think there's just a massive KO threat for Petrosyan. Whereas if there's like 2 to 3 minutes on the ground and Armen's on bottom, he could easily get subbed. There's no questions about it. So I think the cardio is looked much more improved for Vieira. I think the striking's looked much more improved at pick'em price. I think this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm full sending Vieira here. I've risked 4.5 units on him. Like average price about minus 115. Right. I admit there have been many sketchy moments for Adolfo Vieira in the UFC. that's happened. Obviously, he was in a close fight with Stoltzfus before he submitted him, got dropped by Brundage. Obviously, the fluffy fight. But I feel like that kind of lacks some context. In the context of this fight, I would actually argue Armin Petrosian is the worst grappler Rodolfo Vieira has fought in the UFC to date. Um, I think that the main narrative around this fight, if you like the Petrosian side, is Vieira's got bad cardio and Petrosian can get taken down, but he's got great get-ups. Well, the first part of that, I'm not going to sit here and make an argument that Vieira's got good cardio. I think that would be a stupid argument to make. But I feel if you look at the aggregate of his performance, he's actually cardio's better than what people realize. The guy landed 90 significant strikes against Chris Curtis in 3 rounds and was still throwing chucking heat in round 3, despite attempting and failing on 20 takedowns. That is exhausting pace. And he got hit to the body 30 times that fight. Obviously, he subbed Stoltzfus in round 3. He subbed Brundage in round 2. He subbed Piakota in round 2. The only real horrible moment we've seen him cardio-wise is the fluffy fight, and I think that's because he hadn't lost yet as an MMA fighter. He went basically balls to the walls for 7 minutes as hard as he possibly could. And what people don't talk about when they talk about that fight is that he absolutely mugged Fluffy for 5 minutes of that fight. He was, and even gassed out, he was easily getting to dominant positions in that fight. And Fluffy's a very good grappler. We'll talk about Fluffy next week if we're going to talk about big bets. I'm full sending him too. But Fluffy is a very, very good grappler. And so I think his cardio is fine. I don't think it's good, but I think it's fine. And then you have the Petrosian side. It's very good striker. I bet him in his last fight. I like Petrosian striking. High volume, tough guy to outland, manages distance pretty well. But the guy's got grandma hips. He's very, very easy to take down, including his Contender Series fight. He's faced 19 takedown attempts in the UFC. He's been taken down 13 times. Everybody likes to point out that he's got good get-ups, except if you actually look at his get-ups. So you look at his time before he got in the UFC. He's fighting wrestlers, and he's just giving his back, getting up, and then knocking them out. Well, that works kind of in the Russian regionals because none of those guys do jiu-jitsu, and none of them put hooks in. So you can just, if you can fight hands, you can just give your back to get up. And he's mostly done the same in the UFC. And if you look at the 2 times he's actually fought a jiu-jitsu player, Kaio, who controlled him for 10 minutes in that fight, fairly easily won that fight. And then the Gregory Rodriguez fight. And Rodriguez barely grappled, but the 2 takedowns he landed, he immediately got to dominant positions each time, was able to easily get hooks in and get to his back and get a body triangle in each time. He just got over-aggressive with it. I noticed when Petrosian gives the back up, he doesn't really try to deny a hook on the side. He's just kind of very urgent to get to his feet. And I think that's just going to leave a lot of opportunities here. And so I look at the fight and yeah, Petrosian can finish him late if he's gassed out, I guess. But I think the cardio narrative's overrated. Petrosian, I suppose there's some equity here for Petrosian, managing to keep him at the end of the jab and move well, and avoid him. But given that guys like AJ Dobson and Kaio were able to close distance as easily as they were, I can't really imagine that happens that often if you're trying to handicap the fight. And so, yeah, I actually think Vieira is a better wrestler than both Rodriguez and Kaio is. Not that he's a great wrestler, but his blast double is pretty strong, and he's pretty physically strong. So I think once he closes distance, he should be able to get Petrosian down fairly easily. And like you touched on, this is even from Kaio and RoboCop, this is just a different level. He's so much better on top than either of them are. It's not even funny, and he's so much more dangerous. A lot of times Petrosian's able to give his back because a lot of these guys just like working from the back. I'm not even sure Petrosian's going to be able to separate enough to give his back if Vieira is crushing on top. But if he is, Vieira is going to take his back. And so I've seen some people say it's less bullish for him during the Apex than it was when it was in Brazil, because obviously he's from Brazil. But I think the smaller cage makes me a lot more bullish on Vieira in this spot.
I don't think the home field advantage adds more than the small cage. I don't really know how you could get
you're talking maybe 2 to 3% for the small home field advantage versus a 40% or 40% smaller cage. That is for the grappler. I feel like this is a pretty straightforward fight. Vieira is pretty durable too. I don't think it's going to be easy for Arm to finish him. I'm not saying it can't happen. But I think a lot of people are putting stock in the fact that Arman works up quickly and he hasn't been subbed before. And not enough stock in the fact that Adolfo Vieira is just a different animal than anything he's ever seen. And even if he doesn't get subbed, the reason I like the money line so much here, I've seen people make cases for sub 1, sub 2. It's like, let's say his submission defense is as good as people are saying it is. I don't think it is. But let's just say it is. I could easily see Vieira getting 12 minutes of control and winning a decision here. It would not shock me, you know? So, yeah, I think this is a smash spot. I love Vieira in this spot.
So last two things I want to talk about before moving to the next fight. So the thing with the Fluffy fight that I feel like a lot of people give him shit for too. Well, they give him a lot of shit for that fight, but I feel like they're not talking about like Fluffy fights. Almost all of his fights are just insane paces. And that, like you touched on a little bit, that they're all insane paces. So most men can crumble upon that. It happens. And the second thing, the Hobocop and Petrosian fight, when we were originally breaking that down, I mean, pretty much everybody that week was like, well, if RoboCop wrestles well, he's probably going to look like a massive favorite. And a couple times that he actually did look like a massive favorite. So, yep. All right. Moving on to the next fight here, Michael Johnson and Darius Flowers. We got Michael Johnson sitting around minus 139, come back on Flowers plus 120. You know, kids, it's okay to pass, and that's kind of how I feel about this one. I am passing on the Michael Johnson side, though, and again, that's kind of the only side I feel like is the bettable side. To me, Flowers, 5 minutes of cardio, okay power, not a good wrestler. Not that there's going to be any wrestling here in general, but he's much worse defensively on the feet. I mean, Johnson's a better striker. It's just more or less if he gets caught in those first 5 minutes. I don't project a KO for Flowers in those later 2 rounds that high. But it's Michael Johnson. It is what it is. So I think the line's right at minus 140. I'm fine passing. John, what do you think? I know you probably have a stance on Michael Johnson with that head shake.
I have a pretty big stance on Michael Johnson.
Right,
I played him to win 3 units at like an average of like minus 127. The common refrain for Michael Johnson fights is Michael Johnson can't be trusted, right? That Michael Johnson finds a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory on a consistent basis. But
I don't disagree with that. And in a fight like this, I just feel like it's okay. He might just get caught. Like he's
by
far the better fighter. Go ahead.
So that's what he's known for doing. But it's like, are we at the point where we would say Michael Johnson should be near pick'em with an LFA, like a kind of mid to upper tier LFA fighter? Because if we're at that point, then fine, the line's fine. But I that seems insane to me, because that's what Darius Flowers is. This guy, he's a fighter. I'm not going to talk to you. He is not very good at MMA, at least in the context of the UFC. He's a sloppy striker. He's got no defense. He's a pretty bad grappler. His best assets are he's incredibly physically strong, and he's got a good amount of explosion for about 2 to 3 minutes. He came out very hot against Jake Matthews, backed him up, was throwing huge shots, but mostly missing with them. And then after 3 minutes, his output fell off a cliff completely. And I would expect him to do the same thing here against Johnson, but I'm not even sure he'll have that much energy, given that he's now coming down a weight class too to 155 here, which is a big jump, 170 to 55. But look at the guys who have actually come for Michael Johnson like that in his career, who have come aggressive at him. They usually get lit up like a Christmas tree. Like Michael Johnson measures distance very well. He's a very sharp striker. He's longer, he's taller, he's faster. He is a superior boxer in every way. I guess you could make an argument for like Flowers maybe getting a couple takedowns and Johnson collapsing on the mat. I mean, it's happened before. We know that Johnson can be subject to that happening. But Johnson's really, despite being kind of shit when he's flat on the mat, he's got very, very good defensive wrestling. He's very, very tough to get to his hips. He's got great reactive sprawls. So I don't think it's gonna be easy for Flowers to get him down. And even if I do think the wrestling path is live, I feel like Flowers is gonna death gas if he tries to actually push that hard past the round. So I look at it and I'm like, he's just so much more skilled. I know he got knocked out in his last fight. He's been knocked out 3 times in his career, but I feel like him being chinny is an overrated take. Like, you go look at, like, the guys that Michael Johnson's been fighting. I would say the last 10 guys or 12 guys he's fought, ever since Artem Lobov, would all be, like, minus 200 or more against Darius Flowers. This is just a massive step down. Like, this would legitimately be the worst loss of Michael Johnson's career since like 2009, like when he was like on the regionals. Michael Johnson, yes, not a trustworthy fighter, but he's a good defensive wrestler. He's a great boxer. He's a great counter striker. He's defensively sound. Against the guy in Darius Flowers, who all he has is about 3 to 4 minutes of explosions to kill you, and if he comes up empty there, he's completely fucked. Look, I think you can put some equity into Johnson's durability declining and his age, but I really don't think you can put, the combination of Flowers KO and decision being higher than like 35% here, at the most, in my opinion. I think that builds in a lot of regression on the Johnson side. So that's kind of where I think Johnson should be in the minus 185 and minus 200 range. He's just so much better than Darius Flowers is. I feel like this is one of those spots where everybody's trying to get cute with it and like fade Michael Johnson instead of. It kind of reminds me of Ozdemir and Guskov, to be honest, where people were looking for reasons.
I was say Paga. You said Ozdemir, but yeah, I was literally going to say the same thing.
Well, but when Ozdemir fought him, people were looking for reasons not to bet Volkan. It's like I remember I was on here. I'm like, Volkan's a top 10 2-0 fighter. Like, what are we doing? I think that's kind of how I feel here. Like Michael Johnson, he's 2-2 in his last 4 at lightweight. He's a firmly mid-tier UFC lightweight who's a good striker. Like, what are we doing? Like, this should not be.
Like I would say it's like Dan Hooker, Claudio Puelles.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. If he gets KO'd, I'll live with it. That's fine. I'm happy to go pretty heavy though on the chance that he doesn't get KO'd.
Love it, John. Love the stance on MJ. All right, we'll start with you. The next fight here, we got Hobocop, as we were just talking about, versus Brad Tavares. We got Hobocop sitting at about minus 235 and come back on Tavares plus 200. What do you think?
Yeah, small bet on Brad for me. I have a unit on him plus 200. I'm not really a Brad Tavares fan, so I'm not like very passionate about this, but I do feel like this is going to be a 15-minute kickboxing fight. I know Robocop's got good grappling, but he almost never goes to it, and Brad Tavares is probably the best defensive grappler in the division's history. So I really just don't think this is very likely to hit the ground, and even if it does, I'd be very surprised if Robocop can keep it there. So I'm expecting a 15-minute kickboxing fight. I think their durability is kind of equally shaky. I think Robocop's, or I shouldn't say I think, he is a bit of a bigger hitter. I think he hits harder than Brad, but I also think Brad likely has a significant cardio edge here. So I think a lot of that stuff like evens itself out. I'm kind of just expecting them to be close. Like I feel like if you look at Brad over the last couple of years, some of his losses have aged very well. Getting knocked out by Bruno kind of sucks, but I mean, Bruno's got big power. That's how he wins fight, is knocking guys out, He fought very close with DDP, who's the current champion. Obviously, he's won most of the rest of his fights in recent years. And Robocop, conversely, you look at his career, I mean, he's got almost no good wins in retrospect. But Chidi melting down, Julian Marquez, like getting knocked out by, who's the guy knocked out Phil Hawes? The other guy. Bruno Ferreira knocked him out. I just feel like Robocop's good, but his best win is Park. And in that fight, right before he knocked Park out, he almost got knocked out. He's a skilled fighter, but he's got not much grappling equity here. And these guys are going to bang it out on the feet. And yeah, Robocop's got more power, but Brad probably throws his shots a bit straighter. I mean, keep in mind, Robocop got flatlined by Jordan Williams. That happened. It did. Yeah, I'm taking a small bet on Brad. I think Robocop being a favorite's fine. He obviously has more finishing ability. I think he's a slightly better fighter than Brad is, but I really struggle to get past minus 150 on him here. What are your thoughts?
So, not to be a bit of a cop-out here, but I do think Robocop should be like a decent size favorite just because of like the power and I'm not going to say a durability edge, but to me, like he, at least if he does get hurt or wobbled a little bit, he has a good recoverability. And even to that point, I don't feel like his chin is like, oh my God, he gets touched and he goes down. Like that's like the big narrative around Hobocop. And then on the other side with Brad, I mean, you started really off. You're not a big Brad guy. I'm not a big Brad guy either because the guy's just fairly thin margin, doesn't have a ton of power. Not really going to wrestle at all, so you kind of need him to win by margin on volume, really. I think Hobocop should be fine here, personally standing. I think he probably can knock him out in the later rounds, much bigger shots. Yeah. Again, not a hot take.
See.
Going with the favorite, but it is what it is. Happens sometimes. I'll usually be on the favorite. John will be on the dog. It evens out. Evens out. Speaking of dogs, John might be on, and this line is crashing down. We have Ihor Pateria sitting around plus 140 now.
Whoa,
And
when did that happen?
Yes, and Robert
Bruchek?
Brichek minus 170. I'll start it off here at least just because I don't have a huge conviction here. I've watched a little bit of Brichek's early tape. Or most recent tape, I should say. Guy's got big power, but just the level of competition is very low. But on the same side with Ihor, I don't think Ihor is good at all at MMA in general. I mean, the guy's got, again, kind of like with Flowers, he's about maybe 5 minutes of gas, decent power, decent aggro, but like he's one of the worst to ever get signed. So I think this, as much as we're shitting on Juice debuts, I think he should be fine here, Robert.
I think Richard's a fucking bum, to be honest with you. I also agree that Ihor is a bum, by the way.
Yes. But yes, Ihor is down to plus 140, so yes.
So I bet Ihor for a unit and a half to plus 170. I originally had a bet on Albert Duraev, who was supposed to fight Richard originally. I was going to add to that. That was going to be a decent sized position for me. I'm going to go out on Narrative Nation here for a second for you.
All right. Let's hear it.
It's very odd that they signed this Bridget guy. He's not knocking out anybody. He's coming off like 4 straight KO1s, but it's all against bums. He's 33. He's not young. Like, this is not a guy who is really getting better. He's got 20 fights. He's kind of a known quantity. He has no real quality wins that are deserving of being put in the UFC. And he gets a fight with Albert Duraev, who is managed by Ali Abdelaziz. Albert Duraev, who was on the cusp of getting cut. Duraev has to pull out of the fight. And who do they call? Ihor Pateria, who is also managed by Ali Abdelaziz, who is the most influential manager in the sport. It does seem like he likes this fight for his fighters. And I'll be honest, he paid for it. Look, I do think Bridget's got real power in his hands. He throws some decent combinations, and he obviously has a serious knockout power. But beyond that, I don't think he is really any good. He's very low volume. He's very easy to crack if you're in the pocket with him. He's an absolutely atrocious grappler, like really horrendous. And the only decent guys he's fought in Octagon have beaten him. Like, he hasn't really beaten anybody of consequence. So it's like, I don't know what he's doing here. Now, I agree with you. Ihor's shit. He's got bad cardio. We all know that. But he's quick. He's got fast hands. He's got power. He's going to be a lot bigger. This Bridget guy used to fight at 170. Ihor used to fight at 205. This is at 185. He's going to be taller. He's going to have a lot of reach. I think he's going to have a big speed edge here. I think, honestly, he could have people are going to laugh at me for saying it, but like, I have this feeling he could sub here, and he's got like he has a bunch of regional subs against bums. And I'm telling you, this Bridget guy on bottom is like AIDS. It is really atrocious. Like, see, finding his bottom tape, it's so bad. I actually think he could potentially have like grappling success here. Obviously what everybody's going to talk about is Ihor's cardio, but the interesting thing is, if you look at the 2 fights that he's really gassed bad, Bellato and Negumereanu, both of them pressured hard as fuck in those fights and just kept the pace very, very, very high. Bridget's the exact opposite. He's going to be kind of content to fight at a nothing pace here. So it's like, he might gas, but I feel like if it goes to the distance, it's probably going to be a very competitive fight that goes to competitive decision. And I think if it ends inside the distance, it's kind of coin flippy anyway, because both of Ihor's certainly more dynamic, and Bridget certainly has power. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this should be like a pick'em fight, to be honest. So, like, I bet the Ihor side. We'll see what happens. It could age horribly. Ihor is not great, but we'll see.
We will see. All right, co-main event time. We have Dan 50K Ige versus Andre Touchy-Feely. We got Dan Ige sitting around minus 170 and Touchy-Feely sitting around plus 145. I think it should be a good fight for Ige personally. I understand the steam just because I don't think there's, a ton of wrestling upside for Feely here. I think it's largely stays standing, and I favor both the durability and the power of of Ige. Could it be fairly competitive if it goes 15? I guess, but I favor Ige much more standing personally. I know Fili's had a lot of power success in his last couple fights, but I think Ige has a much larger power gap here standing. So, what do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Landwehr fight a bit, in that, I expect on strike count, like if it goes 15 minutes, I expect it'll be competitive on strike count. I wouldn't even be shocked if Feely outlanded him in total strikes,
Yeah,
which obviously I put a lot of value in stats. The thing is, as you mentioned, the hardware gap in this fight is just fucking insane. Ige is like an A plus durability. I feel like Feely's like a C at best these days. Feely doesn't have that much power. Ige's got huge power. So in what's going to be a brawl, I feel like you have to fairly dramatically favor the guy that just hits way harder and is also way more durable. Like Feely could get a couple takedowns, but when does he wrestle proactively? Almost never. Even when it's massively favorable to him. And even if he gets takedowns, I'm not. Ige's not great on bottom, but I'm not really sold that Feely controls him for any real length of time. I mean, the guy got up 9 times against Mosar. I feel like he's probably going to get up against Feely. So, yeah, I feel like honestly, I think the price could be a bit wider. I'm not going to play it at minus 170. Like, if it got down, if we saw Feely steam down to like the minus 140 range, I would probably take a shot at Ige. But yeah, I mean, minus 175 to minus 200 feels fine. Competitive fight on skills. It's just Ige's just got. It's just night and day, the power and durability differences in this fight.
yep, agree. And that brings us to our main event, John. We got Jack Hermansson and Joe Pyfer. I know you probably have a strong stance here because I feel like you are a Joe Pyfer, not hater, but questionnaire. So take it away, main event.
Yeah, I mean, look, I bet Gerald Mearshart for 2 units at plus 170.
Right.
I'm obviously betting Jack Hermansson at being priced worse than Gerald Mearshart here. Not really that tough to do. It's funny because it's like my takes come off as like being a hater, but like I think Piper's a talented fighter. I think he's a fine prospect. He's got big power in his hands. He's a decent boxer. He's explosive. He's very physically strong. Good blast double. Good jiu-jitsu. All things you'd like to see in a prospect. But he's 27 years old. He's had 3 fights in the UFC. And if we're being honest, at this point in their careers, Mearshart's near the bottom of the barrel. Razak's near the bottom of the barrel. He's just one-shot power and nothing else. And obviously, Alan Amedovski is the bottom of the barrel. So he really hasn't done anything meaningful. And it's like, you don't have to go back too far to him getting submitted by John Hoven Petit, gassing out horrendously on the regional scene. So I feel like we haven't learned that much about Pyfer. Like, kind of what I think about Pyfer's game is he's got a decent jab. I don't think he cuts the cage off particularly great, and he's kind of low volume. Like he likes to pick his shots. He's very, very selective. Which, on the one hand, that's not the worst thing in the world for managing your energy. On the other hand, against guys who aren't going to stand in front of you, that's kind of problematic. And when guys aren't in front of him, if you can go back and watch the Mearshart fight, he throws some really wild strikes in that fight to try to close distance that are just so easy to read. But he has huge physicality advantages in this fight. There's no doubt about that. He's much stronger than Jack. He hits much harder. Jack's probably a little fragile. He's been knocked down a handful of times in the UFC. He's been finished twice by strikes on the feet. But with all that said, I just think Jack's the better fighter at this juncture in their careers. Like, you look at the guys Jack's been fighting over the last, 3 years, and it's all just top tier guys. Like, his losses are Dolidze, who he was beating like a drum until that fucking sweep and calf slicer, just like classic Dolidze meme shit. Sean Strickland, which was a split decision, Marvin Vittori, and Jared Cannonier. Now, all 4 of those guys are ranked in the top 10. One of them was just the champion. Vittori fought for the title, and so did Jared. So he was competitive on minutes for stretches with Vittori and Strickland. Like, that is very, very impressive standing. And if you go further back in that, I kind of liken this to his fight with Edmund a bit. I think people would be like, oh, Piper's clearly better than Edmund. And I'm like, I was arguing with someone the other day about this. I'm like, are we sure? Like, would you feel really good about Joe Pyfer against Evan Shabazzian in a 3-round fight? I wouldn't.
I would personally.
Maybe. I just feel like it's like one of those things, though. Edmund had kind of similar like thought. Like, he was minus 190 against Edmund, and now he's plus 200 against Joe Pyfer. And the cardio thing to me is a huge deal in this fight. Like, we've seen Pyfer gas out before. We've seen Jack go 4 times. He's landed over 100 significant strikes in 4 separate fights. The guy never slows down. Um, and the grappling is interesting because I feel like Pyfer could have some grappling success early, just brute forcing it. But man, if he slows down and starts taking sloppy shots, or Jack takes him down while he's slowing down, Jack's an absolute fucking savage on top. And if Piper's tired with Hermansson on top of him, that could go absolutely horrendously for him. And so I look at the fight and I feel like I'm considering a bet on Pyfer KO 1-2 just because I do think that's I think it's reasonably live, and I think that's likely, the clearest path to victory for Pyfer. Because if this gets past the first couple rounds, I think Jack's just going to take over hard and and could dominate the back end of the fight. To be honest, but even on the front end, I've seen takes to bet Jack live, but I feel as if I think Jack's going to outland him from minute one pretty substantially. I feel pretty confident about that. Like, he can get knocked out, but he's going to throw a lot more volume and land a lot more volume. And I think he's going to be a lot harder to hit. Like, how would you line Chris Curtis against Joe Pyfer? Pick him? Curtis favorite?
I don't know. See, I think Pyfer could have more grappling success than like what is probably like on the table that you're probably thinking. I think he could have a little bit of grappling success early there.
Yeah, I think he could here early too, but I think if he grapples a lot, he's going to gas out. That's kind of my view. Either way, the point that I'm making is that when Jack fights guys that aren't top 10 and aren't he tends to dominate. Am I saying he's going to dominate? No. And like I said, I think Piper's a fine prospect, and I think his physicality can give Jack issues. But I mean, Jack is 3x the amount of fights as him. He's fought the level of competition Jack has fought is just night and day to what Pyfer has fought. Like, if you go back to early in Jack's career when he was fighting comparable guys to the guys Pyfer just fought, Jack was running through them and finishing them all too. It's not like he was scraping decisions by with low-level guys. Like, when you get – people always forget this, but you get to the top 10, it gets a lot harder to finish elite fighters, So, yeah, I just think there's huge recency bias attached here. I do give a lot of respect to Pyfer's physicality and his KO upside in this fight. And so I wouldn't go past pick him with it because I think he can hurt and finish Jack early in this fight. But I think the line is crazy. I have 3 units on Jack. I have 2 at plus 180 and another one at plus 228. Yeah, riding with Jack Hermansson this week. Pretty big. What do you think?
Shocker. I'm probably picking the favorite here as usual. But I will not be touching that money line, obviously. Like you touched on a couple minutes ago here, a couple of seconds ago here, really, that if the fight doesn't really end in the first 3 rounds, that I don't see how a money line ticket on Pyfer could even remotely look good. I do give his power in grappling early in the fight just massive credence. But I think, the cardio is really just the big question marks of this fight. And I texted you before about this. I just feel like this fight's more like your alpha versus beta, like how we talked about before with like your BSD Thiago Moises. Not that obviously throw the narrative in there, but like the physicality difference is absolutely massive. Not to mention like just we've seen mental fragility before from Jack in almost every fight when he does fight resistance or he does eat resistance. But I think if you're playing this fight and you like the Pyfer side, the under 2.5 at minus 150, that almost seems like a no-brainer because you can also capture some Jack finishing upside as well. So that's how I would target the fight personally.
I actually think Jack compromising his calf could be a pretty live outcome here. We saw it happen with Razak, and it's worth noting, I think, that, I don't think Jack gets kind of the respect as a kicker that he deserves because he's fought mostly southpaws and Strickland recently. So it's like Strickland's basically impossible to calf kick. And southpaws, he's not really calf kicking them. But Jack, but Pyfer, who doesn't check kicks, he should be able to kick often. And we did see his leg get hurt quite a bit by Razak in his last fight with him. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like this is one of those things where it's like, I can see all the reasons people like Pyfer, but the guy's going from beating Abdul Razak Al-Hassan to fighting in the top 10, and he's a minus 250 favorite. That seems just crazy to me. So, yeah, I'm riding with Jack. So,
yep, the cardio is really just a big question for me with Pyfer. Like, I think obviously his striking is low volume, but the dude has a ton of power, and in the grappling, like you mentioned, solid blast double.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he can take Jack down and maybe even control him early in the fight a bit. But But like, what happens if that happens and he gets swept? And now he's got Jack on top of him, and he's just getting his face punched through the canvas. Like it's like Jack's ground and pound is absolutely barbaric. But we'll see. I like Jack here. I do know some guys I respect who are on the Pyfer side, and that's fine. I'm rolling with my gut. But that'll do it for this week. Guys, if you like the show, drop a like and subscribe. We have a big pay-per-view next week. I've got some big bets on that card. I'm sure Lags will find some bets on that card. Yes, sir.
So to chime in real quick, it's not anything to do with the closing of this show, but I know you talked about eHorse sub. eHorse sub is 14-1.
I like that. So I actually like that quite a bit.
There you go.
I like that quite a bit. I might bet that. I think I'm gonna bet that. I like that a lot.
Round one sub 25-1.
That sounds like Darius Minner plus 1600 against TJ Laramie.
Yep, 16-1. So, good times.
Yeah, those were good times.
Good times.
Those were good times. The best. But yeah, next week, Volkanovski, Topuria, a lot of big fights in that card. Merab Cejudo, Dern, Lemos, Fluffy.
We will have a guest.
We will have a guest. I have someone. I don't know if you have someone.
No, I do not. But I was just saying,
okay.
we will find a guest. But if you have someone.
Okay, so I will chat with you. I told him I would text you, but I keep forgetting to text you about it.
That's okay.
I'm sick for like 2 weeks now, or 3 weeks now. So
you're all good.
Great. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Same time next week, 7 p.m. Eastern. This weekend, full sending Rodolfo Vieira. Himdolfo, it's his time. He's going to submit Armin Petrosian. Drop a like, subscribe. It'll help us out. I will get timestamps up in the video probably tomorrow morning. I'm fucking exhausted right now, so I'm probably going to go to bed like grandma right now. But thanks for coming out, guys. Good luck on your bets this weekend. Peace.
Peace.